close your eyes for a moment, you are standing inside a quiet library. The air smells faintly of paper and dust. Around you are shelves filled with history books, thick volumes, timelines neatly printed along their spines. You've seen these dates before. Egypt, around 3100 BCE, the first dynasties. Mesopotamia, a few centuries earlier, the first cities. China, later still, the rise of organized states. According to these pages, this is where civilization begins. This is the moment humanity steps out of prehistory and into history. Now open your eyes, because the deeper archaeologists dig, the less stable that timeline becomes. For more than a century, historians have relied on a simple framework. Humans lived as small, mobile groups for tens of thousands of years, then gradually settled, farmed, built cities, developed writing, and finally complex societies emerged. It is a model that makes sense. It is supported by layers of evidence. And yet, scattered across the world, there are sites, artifacts, and systems that sit uncomfortably within it. Not impossible, not fake, but difficult to explain. These are places where large-scale construction appears before agriculture, where astronomy emerges before writing, where medical procedures exist without formal science, where dense cities function without rulers, and entire societies seem to operate without warfare. In each case, archaeologists offer explanations, careful, cautious, often persuasive, and still questions remain. This documentary is not about hidden truths or forbidden knowledge. It does not claim that history is wrong or that scholars are deceiving us. Instead, it focuses on something more subtle and perhaps more unsettling: unresolved contradictions. Across different continents and time periods, early human societies repeatedly demonstrate levels of planning, coordination, and knowledge that appear earlier than expected. These cases are usually treated individually, explained within local contexts. Rarely are they placed side by side. But when they are, patterns begin to form. Not a single alternative history, but a suggestion that human development may not have been strictly linear, that progress may have advanced, stalled, fragmented, and re-emerged, that knowledge can be created, preserved in unconventional ways, and sometimes lost entirely. The sites you're about to encounter are real. Their dates are published. Their excavations are documented. Their interpretations are debated in academic journals. What remains uncertain is how they fit together. Are these simply isolated innovations, rare moments where humans exceeded expectations? Or do they hint at deeper capacities in prehistoric societies that we are only beginning to understand? To explore that question, we will move slowly, carefully, and without conclusions, from stone monuments built before farming, to memories preserved without writing, from cities without kings, to civilizations without war. We begin in a place that, according to the traditional timeline, should not exist at all. Case Study 1, Göbekli Tepe. You're standing on a wind-swept hill in southeastern Anatolia. The ground beneath your feet is dry, pale limestone. There are no trees, no rivers nearby, no signs of permanent settlement. Today, the landscape feels empty, but you're not alone in time. The year is approximately 9,600 BC, according to conventional models of human history. This moment belongs firmly to the late Ice Age. Humans live as small, mobile groups. They hunt wild animals, gather seasonal plants, and move frequently. There are no villages, no farming, no metal tools, no written language. Civilization, as it is usually defined, is still thousands of years away. And yet, directly in front of you, massive stone pillars rise from the earth. Each pillar stands up to 5.5 meters tall and weighs as much as 20 tons. They are carved from local limestone, shaped with precision, and arranged in carefully planned circular enclosures. Their surfaces are covered with reliefs. Foxes, lions, wild boar, snakes, birds, and abstract symbols, rendered with confidence and anatomical accuracy. This is not random decoration. It is deliberate, skilled work. The site is now known as Göbekli Tepe, meaning Potbelly Hill. Excavations began in earnest in the mid-1990s under the direction of German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt. What his team uncovered forced a reconsideration of long-standing assumptions about early human societies. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest that more than 90% of the site remains buried, with at least 20 circular structures hidden beneath the surface. Radiocarbon dating of organic material associated with the stone enclosures places construction between 9600 and 8200 BCE, making Göbekli Tepe more than 11,000 years old. That alone is not the puzzle. The problem lies in what this date implies. Hunter-gatherer groups are not thought to have the surplus resources necessary to support large construction projects. Quarrying stone, carving reliefs, transporting multi-ton pillars, and coordinating labor over extended periods typically require stable food production, planning systems, and social organization. These traits are usually associated with farming societies. But Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture. There is no evidence of permanent dwellings at the site. No hearths, no trash pits, no domestic tools suggesting long-term residence. This was not a village. It appears to have been a purely ceremonial complex, visited periodically rather than inhabited. Mainstream archaeologists argue that Göbekli Tepe represents a ritual gathering place where dispersed groups came together seasonally. The shared religious activity, they suggest, may have encouraged cooperation on a scale not previously recognized. Over time, the need to feed large numbers of participants could have incentivized early forms of plant cultivation. In this view, religion did not follow agriculture, it preceded it. And still, certain details remain difficult to resolve. The precision of the stonework implies experienced artisans. The repeated architectural layout suggests long-term planning and cultural continuity. Some pillars are positioned in pairs at the centers of enclosures, possibly representing stylized human figures. If so, symbolic systems were already highly developed. One particular pillar, often referred to as Pillar 43, displays a dense arrangement of animals and abstract shapes. A minority of researchers have proposed that these symbols may encode astronomical information, possibly relating to constellations or celestial events. Most specialists remain cautious, noting that symbolic interpretation without written context is inherently uncertain. Perhaps the most enigmatic aspect of Göbekli Tepe is how it ended. Around 8000 BCE, the enclosures were deliberately filled in with rubble, stone fragments, and soil. The pillars were not toppled by natural disaster. They were carefully buried. Then the site was abandoned. Why would a community invest enormous effort to construct monumental architecture only to intentionally entomb it? Was this an act of preservation? A ritual closure? A response to environmental change or social transformation? Or something else entirely? Göbekli Tepe does not overturn the timeline of human history, but it complicates it. It shows that organized, symbol-rich construction existed earlier than once believed. How widespread such behavior was remains unknown. Was this a unique experiment, or evidence of a broader tradition now lost to time? How did knowledge pass between generations without writing? And if communities like this existed, how many similar sites remain undiscovered, buried, eroded, or forgotten? From this hill of stone and silence, we move outward, away from land entirely and into water. Case Study 2. Submerged structures, Yonaguni and drowned landscapes. You are descending through cold, blue water. Light fades quickly as you move deeper, the surface above turning into a wavering mirror. At around 25 meters below sea level, your dive light catches something unexpected. A straight edge. It does not curve like coral or fracture like broken rock. It runs cleanly, sharply, before meeting another surface at a near right angle. As you move closer, the shape resolves into terraces, broad, flat platforms stacked one above the other, steps, corners, plains. You're off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island, Japan. The structure stretches roughly 150 meters in length and rises dramatically from the seabed, resembling a stepped pyramid or massive stone platform. It is not buried in sediment. It is exposed, standing in open water, as if waiting to be noticed. The discovery was made in 1986 by a local dive operator, Kahatro Eritake, while searching for hammerhead sharks. What he found instead triggered debate that continues decades later. According to established archaeological timelines, no complex stone architecture should exist here at this depth. During the last ice age, sea levels were significantly lower, up to 120 meters below present levels. If this structure was once above water, it would date to at least 10,000 years ago, long before recognized civilizations in East Asia. The physical evidence is striking. Flat terraces intersect at sharp angles. Long, linear features resemble roads or causeways. Some surfaces appear smooth, while others show sharp breaks. There are even formations some observers interpret as carved faces or reliefs, though these claims are heavily disputed. Marine geologist Masaaki Kimura has studied the site for decades. He argues that a significant portion, perhaps 70%, of the structure shows signs of human modification. In his view, natural rock formations may have been altered, shaped, and expanded by human activity when sea levels were lower. Mainstream geologists remain unconvinced. They point out that Yonaguni sits within a region of layered sandstone and limestone prone to tectonic fracturing. Natural processes, they argue, can produce flat plains, straight edges, and stepped forms, especially when joints and bedding planes erode uniformly. Earthquakes and wave action could exaggerate these features over time. In this interpretation, Yonaguni is a natural formation that happens to resemble architecture. And yet, the debate persists because Yonaguni is not alone. Nearly 4,000 kilometers away, off the coast of western India, underwater surveys near the ancient port city of Dwarka have revealed stone walls, platforms, anchors, and pottery fragments resting on the seabed. These finds lie at depth consistent with coastlines exposed during the end of the Ice Age. Dwarka is mentioned in ancient Sanskrit texts as a prosperous coastal city said to have been reclaimed by the sea. Archaeological surveys conducted by India's National Institute of Ocean Technology and the Archaeological Survey of India have confirmed submerged structures, though their exact age remains contested. Mainstream dating places much of the Dwarka material in the Late Bronze Age or early historic period, not prehistory. Skeptics argue that mythological texts should not guide archaeological interpretation, and that submerged ruins can result from gradual coastal erosion rather than sudden catastrophe. Still, the timing is difficult to ignore. Between 12,000 and 8,000 BC, global sea levels rose rapidly as ice sheets melted. Over centuries, not overnight, vast coastal plains were submerged. Any human groups living along those shores would have been displaced, their settlements slowly claimed by the ocean. Today, more than 70% of Earth's surface is underwater, and less than 5% of the ocean floor has been thoroughly explored. If early societies favored coastlines, as many modern ones do, then much of the material record may now lie beyond reach. The question is not whether Yonaguni or Dwarka prove the existence of lost civilizations. They do not. The question is whether our picture of early human settlement is biased by what survives above sea level. Are these formations purely geological coincidences that resemble human design? Or are they fragments of landscapes shaped by people whose histories were erased by rising seas? How many coastal settlements vanish without trace? How would we recognize them if we found them? And if early human groups adapted repeatedly to environmental collapse, what knowledge may have been carried forward, and what may have been lost beneath the waves? From submerged stone, we move inward, from the scale of landscapes to the scale of the human body itself. Case Study 3. Murgar and the Origins of Surgery. You are sitting on the ground in a small settlement at the edge of the Indus Plains. The air is dry. The tools around you are simple: stone blades, bone implements, fire, clay beads. There is no metal here, no written language, no formal medicine. Your tooth aches. The pain is not mild. It pulses, infection has set in, and without intervention, it could spread to the jaw or bloodstream. In a world without antibiotics, this kind of problem can be fatal. A healer approaches. They do not chant. They do not pray. Instead, they take a familiar tool, a bow drill, typically used to bore holes into stone beads. Carefully, with controlled pressure, they place the spinning flint tip against your molar. They begin to drill. This is not speculation. It is physical evidence recovered from the site of Mehrgarh in what is now western Pakistan. Mehrgarh was first excavated in the 1970s by French archaeologist Jean-François Gerrage. The settlement dates back to around 7000 BCE, placing it firmly in the early Neolithic period. It shows evidence of mud brick houses, early agriculture, animal domestication, and long-term occupation spanning thousands of years. But in 2006, a study published in Nature drew global attention to an unexpected discovery. Among skeletal remains dated between 700 and 5500 BCE, researchers identified 11 adult molars from 9 individuals that had been intentionally drilled while the patients were alive. The drill holes range from 1 to 3 millimeters in diameter and penetrated up to 3.5 millimeters deep. Their shapes varied, conical, cylindrical, and trapezoidal, suggesting different techniques were used for different dental problems. Microscopic analysis showed no signs of post-mortem modification. More importantly, the surrounding bone exhibited healing. These individuals survived the procedure and lived for years afterward. This is dentistry. According to conventional models, systematic medical practice emerges much later, alongside urbanization, writing, and formal knowledge transmission. Early Neolithic societies are typically portrayed as experimenting blindly, relying on trial and error with little accumulated expertise. Yet the Mehrgarh evidence suggests something more organized. Performing dental drilling on living patients requires anatomical understanding, precise motor control, and tool specialization. It also implies some awareness, however empirical, of infection management. The survival rates alone indicate that this was not a one-off experiment. Mainstream archaeologists offer a grounded explanation. The bow drill, they note, was already widely used in bead making and craft production. Applying it to dental treatment may have been a practical innovation developed through repeated observation. Pain tolerance may have been culturally conditioned. Knowledge could have spread through apprenticeship rather than written instruction. In this view, Mehrgarh does not represent advanced medicine, only ingenuity within technological limits. And yet, questions remain. Why does this practice appear fully formed with multiple techniques in use? Were the earlier, less precise attempts? How long would it take for a community to develop the confidence to drill into a living person's tooth? Mehrgarh was occupied continuously for nearly 4,500 years, eventually contributing to the rise of the Indus Valley civilization. Its long duration suggests cultural continuity, the kind necessary to preserve and refine specialized knowledge. But if this knowledge existed, what else did it include? Did these communities possess broader medical understanding of herbal treatments, wound care, or internal anatomy that left little trace in the archaeological record? How much early medical practice went undocumented simply because it relied on organic materials and oral instruction? And if sophisticated procedures could exist without writing, how much of early human knowledge has disappeared? Not because it was primitive, but because it was never recorded. From the interior of the human body, we move outward again to the sky. Case study 4, Nabtaplaya and the First Skywatchers. You are standing in what is now one of the driest places on Earth. The ground is cracked. The horizon shimmers with heat. Today, this is the Sahara Desert. But the landscape you are imagining belongs to a very different time. It is around 7000 BC. Seasonal rains arrive predictably. Shallow lakes form across the plain. Grasses grow, and herds of cattle move with them. Small groups of pastoralists follow the water, living mobile lives shaped by climate rather than cities. As night falls, the sky becomes dominant. Without artificial light, the stars appear sharp and crowded. Over generations, patterns emerge. Certain stars rise just before the rains return. Others disappear as the dry season approaches. Slowly, observation becomes expectation. Near a seasonal lake known as Nabta, stone structures begin to appear. At first glance, they are modest, upright stones arranged in circles and lines. But their placement is deliberate. Some stones align with the summer solstice sunrise, marking the moment when the longest day announces the coming rains. Others appear oriented toward specific stars, including Sirius, a star later central to Egyptian calendrical systems. The site was identified in the 1970s by archaeologist Fred Wendorf, but significance became clearer in the late 1990s when researchers, including astrophysicist Thomas Brophy, analyzed the alignments in detail. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest constructions between 900 and 600 BC, making them significantly older than Egypt's first pyramids and even older than Stonehenge. According to standard historical models, this level of astronomical awareness should not exist here. These communities were nomadic. They left no writing. They built no cities. Formal mathematics, as traditionally understood, would not appear for thousands of years. And yet, identifying solstices requires long-term observation. Recognizing stellar patterns demands generational knowledge. The physical evidence supports intentional design. The main stone circle measures roughly 4 meters in diameter, with outlying megaliths positioned at calculated distances. Statistical analysis suggests the alignments are unlikely to be accidental. Nearby burial tumuli indicate sustained ritual importance rather than casual construction. Mainstream scholars interpret Nabta cautiously. They argue that tracking solar cycles would have been essential for a pastoralist dependent on seasonal rainfall. The solstice alignment may represent practical calendrical knowledge rather than advanced astronomy. As for stellar alignments, some researchers believe the correlations are overstated or selectively interpreted. In this view, Nabta reflects careful observation, not complex science. And still, certain questions persist. Why invest effort in stone construction at all if mobility was central to survival? How was knowledge transmitted across generations without written records? And why do similar astronomical concepts appear later, more fully developed, in the temples of ancient Egypt? Environmental change offers part of the answer. Between 600 and 500 BCE, the African humid period ended. The Sahara dried rapidly. Lakes vanished. Grasslands turned to desert. Populations migrated eastward toward the Nile Valley, carrying with them whatever knowledge they had accumulated. Some researchers suggest that these movements may have contributed to the sudden appearance of astronomical symbolism in early Egyptian culture. Others caution that cultural transmission is difficult to prove archaeologically. What is clear is that Nabta was abandoned as conditions worsened. The stones remain where they were placed, marking a sky once observed by people whose names we will never know. Their calculations, whether simple or sophisticated, were preserved in stone rather than text. Were these alignments the product of careful but limited observation, or the remnants of a longer tradition now invisible to us? How much astronomical knowledge can exist without formal science? And how many early observational systems disappeared when environments that sustained them collapsed? From the sky, we turn toward memory itself, not written, not carved, but spoken. Case Study 5, Aboriginal Memory and Deep Time. Imagine someone standing in front of you and describing a coastline they have never seen, not in general terms, but in precise detail, naming bays, islands, reefs, and river mouths. Now imagine learning that this coastline has been underwater for 10,000 years. This is not a thought experiment. It is what researchers have begun to document in the oral traditions of Aboriginal Australians. You are standing on the southern coast of Australia. Today, waves break against cliffs. The sea stretches outward, vast and uninterrupted. But during the last ice age, this coastline lay far beyond the horizon. Sea levels were lower by more than 100 meters, exposing land bridges, plains, and inland seas. In the 2010s, linguist Nicholas Reed and geographer Patrick Nunn began comparing Aboriginal oral narratives with geological reconstructions of ancient shorelines. What they found was unexpected. Stories passed down through song, ceremony, and ritual describe landscapes that no longer exist. In Port Phillip Bay, narratives speak of dry land where rivers once flowed. Areas geological surveys confirm were exposed until around 10,000 BC. In Spencer Gulf, stories name submerged islands and fishing grounds now located by sonar mapping. Traditions from Tasmania describe walking across land that later became the Bay Strait, submerged approximately 12,000 years ago. These accounts are not vague flood myths. They reference specific places and environmental changes. In some cases, the correspondence between story and geology is remarkably close. According to conventional thinking, oral traditions degrade rapidly. Over a few generations, details blur. Over centuries, stories become symbolic. Over millennia, accuracy should disappear entirely. And yet, here is evidence suggesting continuity across 400 to 500 generations. How could this be possible? Anthropologists studying Aboriginal cultures point to structured memory systems. Knowledge is embedded in songlines, oral maps tied to physical landscapes. Stories are reinforced through ritual repetition, initiation ceremonies, and strict custodianship rules governing who may tell which narratives. Deviation is discouraged. Accuracy matters because the information has practical value. Mainstream scholars remain cautious. They argue that stories evolve, absorbing new information over time. Observations of ancient shorelines exposed during low tides could have inspired narratives that were later matched, consciously or unconsciously, to geological reconstructions. Flood myths are common across cultures and do not require eyewitness transmission. From this perspective, correlations do not prove direct memory. Still, the scale of consistency raises questions. Maintaining geographically accurate information for thousands of years without writing challenges assumptions about the limits of human memory. It suggests that oral cultures may have developed information storage systems as robust in their own way as written records. This does not mean every detail is factual, but it does mean dismissal may be premature. If Aboriginal communities preserved ecological and geographic knowledge across deep time, what else might have been transmitted? Navigation techniques, astronomical observations, environmental cycles. Western historiography often treats writing as a threshold of reliability. What is written is trusted. What is spoken is treated as myth. But writing decays. It burns. It breaks. It disappears. Oral systems, when maintained deliberately, can persist as long as the culture itself survives. The deeper question is not whether these stories are true in a literal sense. It is whether our methods of evaluating the past are incomplete. If prehistoric societies relied on memory rather than text, how much of their knowledge would leave no trace in the archaeological record? And how many traditions worldwide have been lost entirely, not through natural decay, but through cultural disruption? From memory encoded in human voices, we turn to memory shaped into earth. Case Study 6, Poverty Point and Monumental Labor. Without farming, you are standing on a broad rise above the Mississippi River Valley. The land is flat and fertile, threaded with waterways. Fish move through shallow channels. Migratory birds pass overhead in seasonal waves. Nuts, fruits, and wild plants are abundant. It is around 1700 BC. According to traditional models, societies at this stage, especially those without agriculture, are small, mobile, and loosely organized. They follow resources as they appear. They do not build large, permanent monuments. They do not coordinate labor on a massive scale. And yet, the ground beneath your feet has been deliberately shaped. Before you stretch a series of 6 concentric, C-shaped earth ridges, each rising between 1 and 2 meters high and spaced roughly 40 to 60 meters apart. Together, they form a complex nearly 1.2 kilometers in diameter. At its center lies a vast open plaza covering more than 15 hectares. Nearby, a massive mound, known as Mound A, rises 22 meters high, with a base wider than a football field. This is Poverty Point, in present-day Louisiana. Engineering estimates suggest that more than 1 million cubic meters of soil were moved by hand to create these earthworks. No wheels, no metal tools, no pack animals, only baskets, human labor, and time. Excavations show that the people who built Poverty Point were hunter-gatherers. Their diet consisted of fish, deer, waterfowl, nuts, and wild plants. There is no evidence of domesticated crops. And yet, the site supported hundreds of permanent residents and thousands more during seasonal gatherings. Artifacts recovered from Poverty Point reveal a vast trade network. Copper from the Great Lakes, stone from the Appalachians, and materials from as far away as the Gulf Coast have been found here, spanning distances of over 1,500 kilometers. More than 100,000 fire clay objects, known as Poverty Point objects, litter the site. They were used as heat retainers in large earth ovens, allowing efficient cooking without pottery. Mainstream archaeology explains Poverty Point as a product of exceptional environmental abundance. The Mississippi Valley, researchers argue, provided such rich resources that people could live semi-sedentary lives without farming. Construction likely occurred gradually, over generations, with small work parties adding to the earthworks during seasonal gatherings. The site may have functioned as a ceremonial and trade hub, reinforcing social bonds across a wide region. This interpretation is grounded and plausible. And still, questions remain. Moving 1 million cubic meters of earth is not a casual undertaking. Even spread across centuries, it requires planning, coordination, and authority structures, formal or informal. Someone had to decide where to build, how high to raise the ridges, and when work would take place. How were workers fed while they labored? How was labor organized without permanent surplus? And why invest so much effort into monumental earthworks if the community remained fundamentally mobile? Poverty Point was occupied for roughly 5 centuries, then abandoned around 1100 BC. There is no clear evidence of warfare, famine, or environmental collapse. The people simply disperse. Why walk away from a landscape so carefully constructed? Some scholars suggest changing river patterns or shifting trade networks made the site less central. Others propose social transformations that left the earthworks symbolically obsolete. Whatever the reason, Poverty Point challenges a persistent assumption that agriculture is a prerequisite for complexity. Here, complex organization appears without farming. Monumental architecture rises without cities. Long-distance trade flourishes without states. Was this a rare convergence of favorable conditions? Or does it point to social systems among hunter-gatherers that we still struggle to recognize? From shaped earth, we move to shape society, from labor coordination to urban life itself. Case Study 7. Catalhoyuk in the city without rulers. You are walking across a flat plain in southern Anatolia. From a distance, the settlement ahead appears unremarkable, a low mound rising gently from the landscape. But as you draw closer, its scale becomes clear. It is around 7000 BC. Before you is a dense cluster of buildings pressed tightly together. There are no streets, no alleys, no gates. The walls of each house touch the next, forming a continuous mass. To enter, you climb a ladder, step onto a rooftop, and descend through an opening in the ceiling. This is Catalhoyuk. At its peak, the settlement covered roughly 13 hectares and housed between 5,000 and 10,000 people, larger than many cities for the next several millennia. And yet, something fundamental is missing. There are no palaces, no temples, no administrative buildings, no fortifications, no identifiable elite residences. Every house is strikingly similar in size and construction. Inside, walls are plastered and decorated with paintings, reliefs, and installations, bull skulls mounted above platforms, abstract patterns, and scenes of animals and hunting. These ritual elements appear throughout the settlement, not concentrated in special structures. Beneath the floors of these homes, the dead are buried. In some cases, dozens of individuals lie interred beneath a single house, suggesting strong ties between ancestry, identity, and domestic space. Excavations began in the late 1950s under James Mellart and have continued since the 1990s under Ian Hodder of Stanford University. Radiocarbon dating places occupation between 7500 and 5700 BCE, spanning nearly 2,000 years. According to conventional models, cities of this size require hierarchy. Someone must organize labor, resolve conflict, allocate resources, and enforce rules. Yet at Catalhoek, archaeologists have found no clear evidence of centralized authority. Mainstream interpretations propose that the community functioned through egalitarian social structures. Resources may have been abundant enough to reduce competition. Decision-making could have occurred through kin groups, consensus, or informal leadership that left no architectural trace. This explanation is cautious and reasonable. Still, questions persist. Maintaining a settlement of this density for 2 millennia requires sophisticated social coordination. Waste management, food distribution, conflict resolution, and shared norms must all function effectively. The uniformity of housing suggests not accidental equality, but actively maintained balance. What mechanisms enforce this balance? Some researchers suggest ritual played a central role, embedding social rules within shared symbolic systems rather than formal governance. Others propose rotating leadership or authority based on age, skill, or spiritual status rather than wealth. If so, these systems left almost no durable trace. Catalhoek eventually declined and was abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental pressure, shifting trade routes, or internal social changes have all been proposed. There is no evidence of violent collapse. If this model worked for 2,000 years, why did it disappear? Was it simply unsustainable at larger scales? Or did later societies choose hierarchy because it offered different advantages, military, economic, or territorial? Catalhoek does not prove that hierarchy is unnecessary, but it demonstrates that dense urban life without formal rulers is possible, at least under certain conditions. What social technologies allowed this to function? Why do they appear so rarely in later history? And how much of early human experimentation with social organization has been erased because it did not leave monuments to power? From cities without kings, we moved to civilizations without war. Case Study 8, Carol and the Question of Peaceful Complexity. You are standing in a broad desert valley on the central coast of Peru. The land is dry, crossed by river channels that flow only seasonally. Beyond them, the Pacific Ocean lies close enough to shape daily life. Fish are abundant. Cotton grows along irrigated fields. Trade routes link coasts and highlands. It is around 2600 BC. Across the world, this period is usually associated with rising hierarchy and organized violence. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, monumental architecture appears alongside kingship, armies, and fortified cities. Warfare is often described as a driving force behind early state formation. But here, the evidence tells a different story. Before you rise the monumental platforms of Cairo, the largest city of a Norte Chico civilization. The site covers more than 60 hectares and contains at least 6 major pyramidal structures, sunken circular plazas, and carefully planned residential zones. The largest pyramid rises nearly 18 meters high, its base stretching over 150 meters across. Radiocarbon dating places Cairo between 3000 and 1800 BC, making it one of the oldest known urban centers in the Americas, contemporary with the pyramids of Egypt and the cities of Sumer. And yet, something is conspicuously absent. Archaeologists have found no weapons, no defensive walls, no mass graves, and no skeletal remains bearing signs of trauma. Artistic representations depict musicians, animals, and ritual scenes, not warriors or conquests. Excavations led by Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady since the 1990s revealed a society organized around cooperation rather than coercion. Labor appears to have been mobilized through ritual and shared ideology. Construction projects were massive, requiring coordination over generations, but there is no evidence of forced labor. Mainstream scholars propose that Carroll's environment made this possible. The combination of rich marine resources and fertile river valleys created abundance. Coastal communities supplied fish and shellfish. Inland groups produced cotton and agricultural goods. This interdependence reduced competition and minimized incentives for conflict. In this model, warfare was unnecessary. Skeptics caution against drawing strong conclusions from absence of evidence. Weapons made of wood or organic materials would not survive archaeologically. Conflict may have occurred without leaving clear traces. Peace, they argue, cannot be proven. This caution is justified. And still, the consistency of the pattern remains striking. Across more than 30 settlements associated with the Norte Chico culture, the same absence persists. No fortifications, no militarized iconography, no obvious signs of organized violence. Carroll flourished for over 1,200 years, then gradually declined. Climate data suggests increasing aridity and disruption to river systems may have undermined the economic balance that sustained cooperation. The settlements were abandoned without signs of destruction. If warfare was absent for over a millennium, how was social order maintained? Some researchers suggest ritual authority replaced military power. Others propose economic interdependence created strong incentives for peace. Still others point to shared cosmological beliefs that frame violence as taboo. If such systems existed, they left few physical markers. Carroll challenges the assumption that violence is a necessary component of complex society. It does not prove that humans are inherently peaceful, but it demonstrates that large-scale organization without warfare is possible, at least under certain conditions. Why, then, did violent models come to dominate elsewhere? Were peaceful societies eventually outcompete by militarized neighbors? Or did changing environments force shifts in social strategy? If cooperation worked once, could it work again? And how many peaceful civilizations may have existed without leaving the scars we expect to find? From cities without war, we turn to symbols, marks that may represent one of humanity's most transformative inventions. Case Study 9. The Vinca symbols and the question of early writing. You are standing along the banks of the Danube River in southeastern Europe. The land is rich, the soil dark and fertile. Villages stretch across the plains, their houses built from timber and clay, arranged in organized rows. Smoke rises from hearths. Pottery dries in the sun. It is around 5,500 BC. According to textbook history, writing does not yet exist. Language is spoken, remembered, performed, but not recorded. True writing, we are told, will appear 2,000 years later in Mesopotamia, when administrators begin pressing signs into clay tablets to track grain and labor. And yet, scattered across this landscape, symbols are appearing. They are incised into pottery, carved onto figurines, and etched into spindle whorls and ritual objects. Simple at first glance, lines, crosses, chevrons, triangles, but repeated, standardized, and shared across vast distances. This is a material culture of the Vinca civilization. The Vinca sites were first excavated in the early 20th century, most notably at Vinca, Belo Burden near modern Belgrade by archaeologist Miloj Vasic. Over time, researchers cataloged more than 200 distinct symbols, found at over 1,000 sites across what is now Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and North Macedonia. Radiocarbon dating places Vinca culture between 5,700 and 4,500 BC. The symbols appear consistently for nearly 1,000 years. Some object displays sequences of symbols arranged in linear order, sometimes exceeding 20 individual marks. The repetition suggests shared conventions rather than personal decoration. The geographic spread suggests communication across communities that never directly interacted. If these marks represent language, they would predate Sumerian cuneiform by millennia. Mainstream scholars urge caution. Writing, they argue, requires systematic encoding of spoken language, phonetic or semantic representation that allows readers to reconstruct speech. No clear evidence shows that Vinca symbols function this way. There is no decipherable grammar, no bilingual inscriptions, no clear evolution into later scripts. In this interpretation, the symbols are proto-writing at best, or perhaps not writing at all. They may represent ownership marks, clan identifiers, ritual signs, or symbolic notation tied to belief systems rather than administration. This explanation fits comfortably within existing models. And still, questions remain. Why such a large number of distinct symbols? Why maintain consistency across generations and regions if the marks carried no shared meaning? And why did this system disappear entirely when Vinca culture collapsed around 4500 BCE? Vinca settlements were unusually advanced for their time. Some covered over 100 hectares, housed thousands of people, and featured early copper smelting two-story houses and organized street layouts. Yet, when the culture declined, possibly due to environmental stress or social change, its symbolic system vanished with it. No successor culture adopted the symbols. No transitional script evolved. Whatever information these marks encoded was lost. If writing was invented independently here and then forgotten, it would challenge the idea that literacy progresses in a straight line. But even if the Vinca symbols were not writing, they represent a sophisticated communication system sustained for centuries. Why does the historical record privilege certain forms of knowledge over others? And how much early symbolic behavior goes unrecognized because it does not fit strict definitions? The Vinca symbols do not rewrite history, but they highlight how fragile innovation can be. If complex symbolic systems can emerge, persist, and then disappear without trace, how many others may have done the same? From symbols pressed into clay, we move to stone stacked into walls, toward one of the oldest inhabited places on Earth. Case Study 10. Jericho and the Paradox of the First Walls. You are standing at the edge of a fertile oasis in the Jordan Valley. The land around you is dry and unforgiving, but here, fresh water flows steadily from a perennial spring. Palms and grasses grow thickly. For thousands of years, people have returned to this exact place. It is around 8000 BC. There is no pottery yet, no metal tools. Agriculture is only beginning to take shape through the harvesting of wild grains. Population density across the region is extremely low. According to conventional expectations, there is little need for defense, hierarchy, or monumental construction. And yet, the settlement before you is surrounded by stone. This is Jericho, often described as the world's oldest continuously inhabited city. Beneath its later biblical layers, archaeologists uncovered something unexpected: a massive stone wall, nearly 4 meters high and 2 meters thick, and a freestanding stone tower rising over 8 meters tall, complete with an internal staircase of 22 steps. These structures date to the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, around 8000 BC. Excavations led by archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon in the 1950s revealed that these constructions were built by people who had not yet adopted full-scale agriculture. There were no domesticated animals, no wheeled transport, and no known large-scale conflicts. Walls typically imply defense. Towers imply vigilance. But defense against what? At this point in human history, there were no cities to besiege, no armies to repel, and no accumulated wealth to raid. Population density was sparse. Resources were locally abundant due to spring. Mainstream interpretations propose alternative explanations. Some scholars suggest the wall functioned as flood control, protecting the settlement from seasonal torrents flowing down nearby wadis. Others argue the tower served a ritual or symbolic purpose, possibly linked to solar alignments or communal identity. There is also evidence of ancestor veneration. Plaster human skulls buried beneath house floors, their facial features carefully reconstructed. In this view, the architecture reflects social cohesion rather than conflict. Still, the labor investment is difficult to overlook. Quarrying and stacking large stones requires coordination, planning, and sustained effort. Even if built gradually, these structures imply an organized community capable of mobilizing labor at a scale unexpected for time. Jericho was not a brief experiment. The site shows continuous occupation for more than 11,000 years, with layers upon layers of rebuilding. Empires rose and fell. Technologies changed. Languages evolved. And yet, people continue to live here. Why? Geography explains part of the answer. In an arid region, a permanent freshwater source is invaluable. But geography alone does not explain the early appearance of monumental architecture. Some researchers argue that the pre-pottery Neolithic period may have been more socially complex and potentially more violent than previously assumed. Others maintain that interpreting walls as defensive reflects modern assumptions rather than ancient realities. Jericho does not offer a clear resolution. It presents an early society capable of large-scale construction without clear evidence of hierarchy or warfare. It raises the possibility that monumental architecture emerged for reasons other than power or protection, perhaps for ritual, memory, or shared identity. Why build walls before cities? Why invest in permanence at a time when most societies remain mobile? And what kind of social organization made this possible? From Jericho's enduring stones, we step back and look at the pattern as a whole. Global pattern synthesis. Across continents and millennia, the case studies you've just encountered share little on the surface. They involve different environments, cultures, and technologies. Some concern stone architecture. Others involve medicine, memory, symbols, or social organization. And yet, certain themes recur. At Göbekli Tepe, monumental construction appears before agriculture. At Yanaguni and Dvarka, landscape suggests that early human activity may be hidden beneath rising seas. At Mehrgar, surgical procedures emerge without formal medicine. At Nabta Playa, astronomical observation precedes writing. Among Aboriginal Australians, memory persists without text. At Poverty Point, massive earthworks rise without farming. At Catalhoyuk, urban life exists without rulers. At Carroll, complexity thrives without warfare. In Vinca, symbolic systems appear without recognized writing. And at Jericho, walls rise before cities. These are not proofs. They are patterns. Mainstream archaeology does not deny these facts. It explains them individually, through local conditions, gradual development, and human adaptability. In many cases, those explanations are convincing. What remains unsettled is how often early societies exceeded our expectations. The dominant model of human progress is linear: hunting to farming, farming to cities, cities to states, states to writing and science. This model is useful, but reality may be less tidy. An alternative view, one increasingly discussed, suggests progress can be punctuated. Knowledge may advance in certain contexts, fragment under pressure, and reappear elsewhere. Environmental change, migration, and social collapse can erase entire systems of expertise. If this is the case, then prehistoric humans were not intellectually inferior. They were operating under different constraints, using different methods of storing and transmitting information. Some knowledge left monuments. Some left stories. Much may have left nothing at all. Recognizing this does not rewrite history. It deepens it. It reminds us that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and that the archaeological record is shaped as much by survival as by achievement. Philosophical close. The past does not speak clearly. It reaches us through fragments, broken tools, eroded walls, half-buried symbols. We reconstruct meaning cautiously, aware that every interpretation carries assumptions shaped by our own time. For generations, Prehistoric societies were described as simple because their material remains appeared simple. But simplicity in artifacts does not necessarily reflect simplicity in thought. What these sites suggest quietly without certainty is that human capability emerged early. Planning, cooperation, observation, and memory did not wait for writing or cities to exist. And still, uncertainty remains. We do not know how widespread these behaviors were. We do not know how often knowledge was lost. We do not know whether these examples represent rare exceptions or faint traces of broader traditions. What we do know is that history is fragile. Entire ways of understanding the world can vanish when environments shift or cultures disappear. Knowledge that is not written can endure or be erased, depending on circumstance. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is not that the past was more advanced than we imagined, but that it was more human. Experimenting, adapting, forgetting, remembering. We tend to see ourselves as a culmination of a long ascent, but the evidence suggests something less comforting and more complex. Progress may not be a straight path forward. It may be a series of rises and losses, discoveries and disappearances. If that is true, then the stones, stories, and symbols left behind are not messages of forgotten greatness, but reminders of how easily knowledge can slip away, and how much we still do not know.